Ladies and gentlemen, this is a conversation. War, a tribute to Andrew Breitbart. Please welcome, from Turning Point USA, Charlie Kirk. From Project Veritas, James O'Keefe. From Breitbart News Network, Matt Boyle. And your host, Larry O'Connor.
Hey guys, let's hear it for Andrew Breitbart. Oh, he's more than just a name on a website, especially here at CPAC. It was, guys, it was 10 years ago this week that Andrew Breitbart gave his last major public speech. We lost him on March 1st, 10 years ago next week. But that speech, like all of his speeches at CPAC, instantly became legendary. I just watched it last week.
I literally just watched it as well. It was weirdly prophetic, wasn't it?
Yeah.
All the major issues that he's talking about, the critical race theory.
Oh, yeah. Literally the major story that he was ready to break right after CPAC leading into the 2012 election was how Barack Obama had been infected with critical race theory in Harvard. Critical race theory. Remember when critical race theory became a big story this last election and people went on MSNBC saying, they don't even know what critical race theory is. They just, found out about it. No, Andrew Breitbart, as usual, ahead of his time, talking about it 10 years ago. We each represent a very different relationship directly with Andrew Breitbart in our own way. Andrew plucked me out of the world of commercial theater. I literally worked on Broadway, not as an actor, but in management of the theater management. I managed a theater in Los Angeles. He took me out of that world and put me into the world of political commentary with my first column at his first site, Big Hollywood, that then eventually morphed into Breitbart News Network. So I got to work with him for 3 glorious years and have a whole new career. Matt, you ended up working with Andrew for his company right after his passing, right?
Yeah, so I was a reporter at Daily Caller, got to know him really well. Tucker Carlson introduced me to Andrew, and then Andrew passed away in early 2012. After the 2012 election, I came over to work at Breitbart and build out our DC bureau.
Right.
But yeah, it totally changed my life. I could have went to go anywhere in the establishment media. I was breaking all sorts of big stories and whatever. Andrew changed my life. Like, I literally chose this path to build out a new conservative media outlet, and guess what? We're kicking their butts all the time right now. So,
I think it's fair to say Andrew changed all our lives. James, I mentioned Big Hollywood. That launched January of 2009. I believe it was September. Along came this brand new site, Big Government. And it launched with a little expose about an organization that no longer exists called Acorn. Remember that? James?
Well, I had got a message from Hannah Giles, and she said she wanted to go into Acorn as a prostitute. So I said,
Did you often get messages from Hannah like this? Or?
I get a lot of messages from a lot of people. And I said, well, why don't we go in there? I'll go in there as a pimp. Sure, why not?
A logical response.
Do a sting investigation into Acorn, and this is right before Project Veritas even existed. So we did the video, did the whole story, for those of you who remember it 10 years ago, actually 12 years ago.
12 years ago, right.
And I didn't know who to go to with the tapes. And everyone sort of said, well, there's this guy named Andrew Breitbart. I didn't know him, and I called him up, or he called me, and he said, I don't believe you have this information. So I said, well, can I come to Los Angeles and show you? He's like, sure. So I went to his house, I opened up my laptop, I played the first Acorn video of me with a hidden camera in my tie recording these workers, and he instantly said, this is going to change everything. This is going to embarrass the New York Times. And he came up with this strategy to release the tapes one at a time.
Because you had investigated multiple Acorn offices.
Yeah, we had a whole bunch.
On the East Coast.
So he predicted rightfully that these CNN and everyone would say it's isolated, and then the next day the second tape, and the third day the third tape, and the fourth, and by like the end of the first week, Congress, democratically controlled Senate, defunded Acorn.
82-6 vote, if I remember right, or maybe 89-2 vote.
It was 83-7. South Park covered it. The Daily Show covered it favorably.
Yeah. And then Charlie, and frankly, I think your representation here is most meaningful. because you didn't meet Andrew personally. But you represent so many people out there, so many people in this room who were inspired by Andrew Breitbart, who have started a movement on their own because of the inspiration Andrew gave you.
Yeah, not just inspired. My first piece I ever wrote was for Breitbart.com, and it wasn't, kind of unpacking a interstate government-funded prostitution ring. By the way,
well, raise the bar, Charlie. Great? Come on.
Oh yeah, exactly. I just want to say, isn't James O'Keefe doing great work in Project Veritas? They're doing unbelievable work. They really are. I want to make sure I say that, James. You're continuing the legacy of Andrew amazingly. But I was in high school, and I found a textbook that said kind of really incendiary things, at least what would have been considered that 10 years ago. And I emailed Joel Pollack. I just saw his email on Breitbart.com and as a tip, and he's like, why don't you just write the piece? And it got on Drudge Report and kind of all of that. And without Breitbart.com, I don't know if I ever would have been involved in this at all. And I got to know the whole team at Breitbart really well. Matt, you and I have been working together for quite some time. Got to know Alex and got to know Larry. And, the legacy of Andrew was always believing in younger, aspirational, entrepreneurial talent. He was the best at that. And, there are a lot of names we could go through, but, if you look at the kind of roster of people that are now in conservative politics and media, so many of them were kind of nurtured and also kind of given a platform by Andrew. He was a movement guy. He was not an empire guy. And I never had an opportunity to meet him. In fact, my piece was written a month after he passed away.
Wow.
So almost exactly a month after. I want to say one other thing about Breitbart and Andrew, which is we take for granted this kind of idea of making things go viral, right? And so for some of the younger people here, if you're in high school or college, you might not know how good Andrew was at this. He was the pioneer. He invented this. He was the one that was able to get Anthony Weiner completely resigned in disgrace, right? Amongst many other things. But in perfect Andrew Breitbart fashion, where he actually ended up at the podium at Anthony Weiner's own press conference. That's right.
Taking questions across all the cable channels. It wasn't enough that Anthony Weiner had to resign in disgrace. Andrew had to be there to MC the entire event.
It was a total surprise, too, by the way. I remember on his way in there, he called me, and I was like, we're all sitting there waiting to watch to see Anthony Weiner come out. And he's like, I'm like, where are you? He's like, I'm about to walk into the Anthony Weiner press conference. I'm like, what? I was shocked. It was, and then next thing you know, there's Andrew on TV.
I wish I would have kept, he gave a group text message to us, because a couple of us were like, Andrew, are you sure you want to go into the Anthony Weiner press conference? And of course, we always second guessed him, and he was always right. I wish I'd have saved this. The text message was, don't worry, I'll keep a low profile. Next thing. Sorry, but you were saying, Charlie.
No, I mean, it's, and it's exactly right. And so the movement we have at Turning Point USA, Project Veritas, they're all offshoots from the energy of Andrew.
Yeah.
And it lives on in more ways than one. He was the first person that mastered the viral medium of getting a video in front of millions of people. And, we take that for granted now. But he really was the architect.
Oh, an incredible pioneer with, please, absolutely applaud anytime you want, because it's for Andrew. He was a pioneer not just for the media, but certainly for the intersection of media and politics and culture and everything. I want to say something real fast, though, because the name of this panel is War. And you've all seen the video of Andrew saying war, right? And that was the trailer for the film Hating Breitbart. And there were a lot of hashtags about Andrew Breitbart, war, and Breitbart's army. And there are all these you talk about viral videos of Andrew Breitbart, he's always in the trenches fighting. And it was great to see somebody fighting for us for a change. This was 10 years ago when we were used to the, blue jacket, khaki pants, penny loafer, country club kind of conservative. No offense, James. And Andrew would show up in his, beat up Converse and Hawaiian shirt and his hair everywhere, but he was fighting for us. He would go toward the crowd, and he was a fighter. But I don't want us to forget something. The term happy warrior is thrown around a lot. He was the quintessential happy warrior. Andrew Breitbart was hilarious. The funnest time I've ever had in my entire professional life was the 3 years I worked for him. I never stopped laughing.
He was so much fun hanging out with all the time. I mean, that's okay, so first off, I highly recommend that everybody go out there and watch some of the old speeches, because he is pretty funny, and you see the sense of humor come through. Like that 2012 CPAC speech is probably the best one. In it, he talks about going to dinner with Bill Ayers and Bernadine Dorn. This was a thing that so these two lefty, Bill Ayers.
These
and
are the
Bernadine Dorn,
terrorists from the Weather Underground who
Weather Underground
inspired
terrorists
Barack Obama's political career.
Right, exactly. And so they put out a thing during the beginning of the Obama administration, an auction for a dinner with them. And I remember when it came out, I was a reporter at Daily Caller. I encouraged Tucker Carlson to go buy it. So he did. He got it. And then he invited Andrew as his guest to go with him. And then Andrew's talking about it.
Tucker wins this dinner with them, and the first thing, we got to get Andrew at the table.
Right. And so now in this speech at CPAC in 2012, Andrew's talking about how excellent a cook Bill Ayers is, right? Like, he made very excellent ribs and succulent squash and everything. But then he's like, they were very charming people, but, then he goes, but so was Ted Bundy, right? So again, Andrew, very funny guy, and that personality and that fun mentality, that happy warrior mentality, I think carries through.
Yeah, and I'm afraid we don't often see that part of it. It's out there. We need to see it. But I mean, James, the audacious way you presented the Acorn videos, and then the just flat out fun Andrew had with it.
Yeah, what I remember about Andrew is a couple things. He simultaneously was able to hold the media accountable, yet speak with them and work with them. That's a very fine line. And now, people in this room, people hate the mainstream media, but Andrew was able to sort of hack the mainstream media and get them to cover things.
Yeah.
And right before he died, a few days before he died, he died 10 years ago on, I believe, March 1st, Tuesday.
March 1st, the evening of the 20th. It was a leap year. It was the 29th evening to the 1st.
A few days before that, we were going through a lot at the time. You and I were working together, and I was doing videos, and he said, James, and I'm paraphrasing him, he said, they want us on a leash. They want us to dance with them, but we're not going to dance with them. He had this very profound, intense way of speaking.
Yeah.
And he said, and there was a quote that he said where if you keep running towards the fire, if you keep going, you send a message to other people that are rooting for you that they in fact can do it too, if you keep going. But he was a force of nature. I mean, I have so many stories, but there was one story about the alpaca, right? The alpaca retracto, the correction alpaca.
All right, so we started getting these newspapers and websites to retract fake stories. Fake news. Andrew knew about fake news well before it became a catchphrase. And this actually was the brilliance of Alex Marlow, who's now the editor-in-chief of the Breitbart sites. At the time, he was the first person Andrew ever hired. He met him giving a speech to young conservatives at Berkeley, by the way. No, but this is a lesson. When you're Andrew Breitbart or any conservative, there are conservatives even at Berkeley, and Alex Marlow was one of them. And he gave a Young Americans for Freedom, Young Americans Foundation speech at Berkeley. Alex went up and said, I love you, I want to work for you, and he hired him. I think his first day on the job, he helped him move his desk out of his...
That was, the alpaca was Alex's idea.
Alex came out, he says, we got all these retractions on these fake stories. And Andrew said, well, you got to brand the retraction somehow, brand it. It's like, how do you brand a retraction? They created a byline at the big journalism site called Retracto the Correction Alpaca.
And he lives on to this day.
It's obvious. That's a logical thing to do.
It does come up on our editor calls.
Andrew called me because I was arrested in New Orleans and everyone was lying about what happened to me. And then at like midnight, Andrew calls me and he goes, James, the mascot for the Retracto theme song is an alpaca. And we laughed until we cried. I don't know why, but it was just so random and he just goofy and funny. We laughed until we cried on midnight in February 2010.
Oh, man.
That was a pretty amazing moment.
Yeah. And actually, Charlie, this is important because his humor and his love of life and how the vivacious way he approached all of this stuff as a happy warrior, this attracted young people to him. I mean, how old were you at the time? 20?
I was in high school, I was 18.
18.
Yeah.
And for God's sake, how many times have we gone to these conferences and we hear somebody who's 90 years old saying, how do we attract young people to the movement? How did Andrew attract you to the movement?
Yeah, I mean, he was authentic and he was willing to push the boundaries. It was the videos of him going up to protesters, asking them, what does your sign say? And they didn't know. They didn't even know what sign. They're like, I don't know. He was the first one to do that, right? He was the first one to actually go straight into the fire. And every enemy Andrew Breitbart had, it was a good list. That list still is pretty good to this day, I could tell you. He would go to all their conferences and just show up in the lobby. And look, we're kind of used to that now, and some, not used to it, but there's a lot of different people that kind of do that sort of work. This was unheard of in like 2010 conservatism, right?
Yeah.
It was like, hey, we don't control the White House, Obama's president, like just wait your turn.
Keep your head down, lay low.
Yeah, keep your head down. And Andrew was going around talking about, how Barack Obama is destroying the country from within, and he's doing it, intentionally. Breitbart.com and Andrew completely changed the way that conservatives fight the left. This is one of his great legacies. And Andrew fought to win.
Yeah.
Is that he didn't
fought to win. Thank you.
And
it wasn't just to be in the fight. It was like, wait, we're doing something.
No,
here.
it was like, okay, the other side decided to end kind of the coffee shop dialogue a long time ago, right? It's like, we're in a street fight. And Andrew's like, okay, if we're in a street fight, then we're gonna win because the country's at stake. And I think that's inspired millions of people in a very profound way.
But I don't want to overlook the fact, again, I remember going with him and Brandon Darby, who still, he runs Breitbart,
he runs
Texas,
our border
right?
team.
Brandon Darby and I accompanied Andrew to a protest of I think it was America for Prosperity out in Palm Desert, California. And Andrew says, all right, we're going to go to the protesters, we're going to confront them, we're going to start challenging them, we're going to ask them questions. And Larry, you're going to be the cameraman. Brandon, you're going to do tactical. We're going to make sure that we got to watch our back and everything. So we're getting all set. So we park, we get out, he goes to the back of his Range Rover and he starts putting on rollerblades. It's like, wait, Andrew, we didn't talk through the rollerblade part of this. What are you talking about? He goes, oh yeah, the whole time I'm taunting them and challenging them and I'm going to be on rollerblades. Which was, of course, brilliant in its insanity, but that went viral, right? You said and so it was always with a smile. In fact, at the end, he said to all the protesters, all right, come on, we're all going to Applebee's. And I kid you not, we were tracking them on Twitter and on social media, they all went to Applebee's. We almost went.
Hilarious.
We should have gone to Applebee's as well.
Can I say one quick thing?
No.
Everyone here has heard the expression multiple times, politics flows downstream from culture.
Oh, yeah.
That was him. He identified this early. He made conservatives reorient what mattered as well. And he wrote about it in his book extensively. He said, look, the arts, the culture, Hollywood matters a lot more than whether or not, ours versus
He also had this understanding of the institutional flaws of the establishment media. So if you listen to people that work at the New York Times or CNN or any of these other places, they claim to be objective. They claim that here's the problem with that. We're human beings. Any decision we make has the opportunity for the insertion of bias, intended or not. And in some cases, a lot of the establishment media, it's unintended. But what we see is what stories they cover, what stories they don't cover.
Yeah.
That's the most important thing. They ignore important stories. And what's happened in the time frame since Andrew passed away is, look, we've built out Breitbart.com and these other institutions, what Charlie's doing at Turning Point, what James is doing, what Larry's doing, what everybody else is doing out here throughout the conservative media. we've literally built these things into a strong institution that didn't exist before. And so, frankly, just Breitbart in the last 3 months alone, we beat the New York Times, the Washington Post, The Hill, and Politico combined. And I think we're seeing similar stuff from a lot of these other places as well. And I think that again, these institutions wouldn't have existed had Andrew not paved the way for all of us beforehand.
James, Charlie just mentioned something very important, too, about the tactics. I remember you rolled out a lot of the videos utilizing Saul Alinsky's rules for radicals, remember? Like the headline of each new video took one of Saul Alinsky's rules. Because let's be clear, Saul Alinsky was a terrible, horrible anti-American communist. But that doesn't mean his rules weren't correct. The rules actually are effective. The difference was he used their rules against them.
Yeah, Alinsky, Andrew and I, when I met him in his basement with Larry Soloff.
Yeah.
Alinsky rule number 4, make them live up to their own book of rules. And Alinsky says in his book, Rules for Radicals, you can destroy them with that because they can't live up to your book of rules, but they have to live up to their own. So, another story was he was a leader, but he was also very tactical. So he would tweet, I don't know how many times a day. It was like a machine. He would tweet hundreds of times, and he would get into every little fight, no matter how big or small, he would fight the person the rule is you only punch up. Well, he'd punch down. I mean, he'd tweet, reply to every single person. And there was one video we did, Teachers Gone Wild in New Jersey.
Oh, yeah?
In 2010. And we did this video, and I had just got off the set with the IFB and doing a local media hit, and he'd already transcribed Chris Christie's entire speech about it. He transcribed the speech, so he wasn't just this leader, he was fighting in every little trench. And it was all about narrative. And again, I don't know of anyone else who's really filled his shoes.
Oh, everybody said after he died, who will replace Andrew Breitbart? No one.
No one did what he did.
No, but let's talk this through for a minute. Couple names you might recognize, couple names you might not, because they do vital work behind the scenes as well. But we mentioned Alex Marlow, the new editor-in-chief, or not new, but he's the editor-in-chief of Breitbart and hosts the Sirius XM radio show for Breitbart. Joel Pollack, a vital voice at Breitbart right now, right? The four of us up here, right? How about a Dana Lash, right? All right? How about Ben Shapiro, right? How about where was Ben Shapiro for? I mean, it was at the Breitbart sites. John Nolte, who is still a vital voice at Big Hollywood, right? Christian Toto, who does incredible work on Hollywood and the culture. I'm leaving so many people out of this conversation.
There's literally hundreds. I mean,
Andrew Klavan, Steven Crowder, right? And by the way, a guy who had a really obscure 4 a.m. show on Fox, thanks to Andrew Breitbart's suggestion, who started writing at the Breitbart sites. His name is Greg Gutfeld. Kurt Schlichter, Krista Gall, I mean, I can go, Tony Katz, and all of my colleagues in talk radio right now, we owe all of this to Andrew. He's a great baseball fan, Andrew was, sadly for the Dodgers. But he used to say he didn't want to be the cleanup hitter, he didn't want to be the leadoff hitter, he didn't even want to play on the team, he didn't even want to be the manager, he wanted to be the talent scout. He would say that all the time. He thought his special skill was finding the right people and putting them in the right place. I mean, look.
Well, and by the way, I mean, speaking of which, I mean, we've literally hired over the course of the last 10 years that I've been working here, dozens and dozens of new up-and-coming reporters. I mean, the names that you just rattled off there are, a lot of those people are really well-known names, but we've got new and
the next generation.
Yeah, the next generation. By the way, speaking of which, anybody out there that knows anybody that wants to be a reporter, reach out to me. We are hiring. So, and I know James is just a big hire that he announced a few minutes ago. But we are definitely hiring. So we are always looking for talented young people. So, but it's exciting to see these young folks come through. That's one of the coolest parts of the job.
In 2010, I want to say, White House Correspondents Association dinner, Andrew goes, reported, James does rock. You just do whatever you, let it flow, buddy.
He's feeling the Andrew energy.
Andrew crashes the MSNBC party at the White House Correspondents Association. Rachel Maddow is tending bar. Andrew goes right up to her and starts talking to her. And she makes him a drink. And he says, well, make yourself one. And she does. And they start drinking and laughing together. And there's a picture, it's a very famous picture, of Andrew at the bar with Rachel Maddow, and they're like toasting each other. Because everyone loved Andrew, even the people who pretended to hate him. And I think that we can take something from that.
One of the things that reminds me of a story with the New Yorker reporter. I don't know if you were there or someone was there, but it was a New York reporter. And everywhere I'd go, Andrew would have reporters following him, like an entourage of magazine writers. And in the beginning, I was a little skittish. I was like, you sure you want to be interviewed by these people? I don't trust them. And Andrew had a totally unique approach. He would say, no, be yourself in front of them. Just be yourself. Just say who you are. Identify yourself. And I think a lot of people in this room would be very scared about being interviewed by a reporter for New Yorker magazine. Andrew had a radical approach, which was be yourself, be open. And I've become more that way. Kept less secrets, if you will. No bad secrets, but just be yourself. And everywhere I'd go, he'd have a Slate reporter, a New York reporter, a Wired reporter following him around. Yeah. And he said, don't just be open about who you are. And that's the way he was, and you got to really know him, and he was who he said he was.
He did Bill Maher's show, and they treated him horribly. I got to hang out with him backstage and in the green room, and they were all just awful to him. And when he was on stage, all the writers were making snide comments, and Marlo and I were in the green room with them, and we're like, "Oh, we're here with Andrew." And afterwards, they do a party, an after-show party, and Bill couldn't stop. It was just Bill and Andrew in the center of the room, talking to each other and having a great time. And Bill respected Andrew, and Andrew enjoyed being on the show, and they were worlds apart politically, right? But he understood how to utilize that platform and get it. Oh, and boy, all the writers just hated the fact that Bill Maher was spending time with Andrew.
But here's the thing,
that
if
would
he
happen.
connected just a little bit and convinced Bill Maher just a little bit, and by the way, look
at where Bill Maher is now. That's
like,
right.
I mean, he's out there questioning some of the stuff on the pandemic and all these other things.
Yeah.
So if you connect with these people just a little bit, isn't it worth it?
Last thoughts, guys, before, because they made the mistake of telling us before we came out that they were running early, and so screw it.
I mean, look, I'll say one. I have this kind of story that is about Andrew, not that anything I experienced, but that we can all thank Andrew for, which is, so the Clintons hated Andrew because he was really good at what he did, right? So Andrew passed away in the spring of 2012, but his work and his legacy lived on for years after. So he was able to expose Anthony Weiner for all of his, let's say, illegal activities, let's put it nicely. And because of that, there were several federal investigations that were triggered in the years that followed, including seizures of laptops and personal information. So allegedly, Anthony Weiner had a relationship with Huma Abedin as his wife or whatever, and the FBI came and seized Anthony Weiner's laptop. Now, you might remember in the fall, this is all thanks to Andrew Breitbart, by the way. In the fall of 2016, October of 16, like a couple days before the election, James Comey issues that famous memo saying that there's still an investigation ongoing into Hillary Clinton's emails. Now, what was he talking about? He was talking about material that was sourced directly from Huma Abedin, who is friends with Hillary Clinton, and triggered James Comey to write that letter that some people say made Donald Trump win that following Tuesday and Hillary Clinton lose. So even after Andrew Breitbart passed, he was still defeating leftists, and he helped get Donald Trump elected in 2016.
Charlie, it is.
Back to the Acorn story, we had broken the story, released the tapes one at a time. And of course, the media, it's an isolated incident. You know, they got thrown out of the other offices. And of course, my phone rang on that, whatever day it was in September 2009, some 70 times. The media would not stop. They wanted to personalize the story, make it about me. At the time, no one knew who I was. And Andrew said, do not pick up that phone. Do not answer that phone from the Washington Post or CNN. They were trying to personalize the story, make it about you. So I didn't. And then he went on Rush Limbaugh's show. Andrew Breitbart wrote a column, why James O'Keefe does not take phone calls from an intrepid CNN producer. And he read it live on the air. And I mean, my phone would not stop ringing because these journalists did not want to cover the story.
Yeah.
They wanted to make it about who is this guy.
Yeah.
So I never picked up the phone. For the first 3 days, no one had any idea who I was. Andrew Breitbart knew how to play the media, how to force them to do their jobs. I just hired a producer from CNN, and he got up here and said, do your jobs.
Yeah.
Andrew made them do their jobs.
I would just say, thinking back on this whole idea of, again, looking back at some of those old speeches, again, the 2012 CPAC speech, other ones out there where Andrew was weirdly prophetic and ahead of his time significantly. We're at a point now where, I remember back then when Republicans wouldn't fight the culture wars and they wouldn't get, it felt like there were only a handful of us out here willing to ask tougher questions. I think that you're seeing more and more people across the movement, across the party, et cetera, really getting engaged on all of these things. I mean, it's a central part of the Republican Party now to challenge the defund the police, to challenge critical race theory. Before, they wouldn't touch it with a 50-foot pole, never mind a 10-foot pole.
Yeah.
So I think that, if anything, Andrew Breitbart is still winning the war. It's an ongoing war, don't get me wrong. We've got a lot of work to do, but his vision is winning the war for the hearts and soul of the movement and the party, and more broadly the country. And I think that there is an end in sight, and I think we can beat the left.
Yeah, amen. I loved Andrew Breitbart. The greatest 3 years of my life were the 3 years I worked with him. And I'll never forget that time. And my life has changed because of him. And he'll always be with us. Charlie said that one of Andrew's favorite things to say was politics was downstream from culture. He would give a speech to young people and he would say, you want to change this country? You're a young conservative with a fire in your heart. You want to make a difference? Don't move to Washington, D.C. They'll ruin you there. Move to Hollywood. You really want to make a difference? You move to Hollywood. Let me tell you something. This week, Jen Psaki went on Rob Lowe's podcast, because of course Rob Lowe has a podcast, and revealed that what convinced her to get back into politics, did you see this story? What convinced her to get back into politics was binging every season of The West Wing. No, don't underestimate this. We have legions of Chardonnay sipping, Peloton riding leftists in our American government right now that were inspired by Aaron Sorkin and The West Wing because they think it's real life. And they think that this is what our country is about. And guess what? They're remaking it right now before our very eyes in the model of Aaron Sorkin's Little Pipe Dream. You want to change the country? You change it through Netflix. You change it through Amazon Prime. You change it through creating content that has nothing to do with news and politics and theology, but has everything to do with news and politics and theology. And there's a lot of moms and dads in this room right now, and their kids, when they're 12, 13, maybe getting into high school, they'll go to you and they'll say, Mom, Dad, I want to be an actor. I want to be a writer. I want to be a director. I want to be in the arts. And you're going to say, nope. My kid's going to be a lawyer. My kid's going to be a politician. My kid's going to go into investment banking. Because, yeah, we need more bankers and politicians and lawyers in our world. You wonder why all of the dreck you see from Hollywood is liberal and progressive and leftist and Marxist and undermines this country? Because all the people who were making that content, they had parents who supported their kids and said, yeah, go into the arts. So you want to follow Andrew Breitbart's legacy and really pick up what he had to say? Inspire your kids and don't say no to them, because that is truly how we'll change this country. Thank you so much for your time today. Thank you, gentlemen.
Thank you.
Thank you.